Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carla Sanabria, and I will be the facilitator for today's session alongside Ms. Hannah McRae, who will be co-facilitating today. I am an officer of the Student National Education Association, also known as SNEA. So I'm just gonna go over some simple housekeeping rules before we get started. The first one being to please make sure that you have your microphones muted throughout today's presentation, unless instructed otherwise by our presenters. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, make sure to write those in the chat box, which I see that some are already using, because there will be a time designated to answering those. With that being said, today's presenters are Ms. Kristen Lamoreaux and Nicolette Hunter from Lake County Public Schools. And with that being said, the School of Teacher Education and Student National Education Association presents Teacher Panel Q&A. Take it away, girl.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming, I guess. Thanks for inviting me. How about that? Thanks for inviting us. And I don't know how this is gonna go, if someone's gonna ask us a question first, or.
Yes, I will be asking you, maybe if you want to share a little bit about yourselves before we get started, that would be great.
Great. Nicolette, I'll let you talk.
Oh, okay. I'm Nicolette Hunter. I teach first grade at Treadway Elementary School. I am in my third year teaching. I currently teach 12 in-person students and 22 virtual students.
I am Kristen Lamoreaux, and I teach second grade at Astatula Elementary. And this is my 5th year, going into my 6th year teaching. And this is my first year in second grade teaching, and I teach, right now I have 13 students face-to-face.
That's a lot. Okay, well, the first question we have prepared is quite hefty, so I'm gonna read a couple of them and you answer whatever you feel is best. The first one is, what are the required reading assessments for your classroom? When are these administered? Do you use an informational reading inventory? If so, what is it? And what accommodations do you make for your English language learners, ELLs?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, whichever one you want.
Okay. I'm trying to pull, I got those questions. I've been trying to find the email that they were in so I can answer it a little bit better. Oh, got them. All right. So the required reading assessments for my classroom, to start with, we do iReady assessments in the beginning, middle, and end of the year. I think that's countywide, if I'm not mistaken. We also do, so we did weekly reading tests, which we're in the process of changing the weekly reading test to an end of the standards test. So once we have taught the standard, then we're going to be assessing using the iReady teacher toolbox stuff that they have available this year, which is really exciting. So we're kind of in the process of changing how we're doing our assessments. So that's the weekly, or that was the weekly. And then we also administer spelling tests on the different phonics components. We do those weekly. We test on a grammar component, so nouns, verbs, adjectives. We do that at the end of every unit. So about every 5 to 6 weeks we test on that. We also test on sight words about every 5 to 6 weeks as well. So that's the, do you use informal reading inventories? The informal reading inventories, I think this is what it's asking. We do reading conferences. Is that what that question's referring to? Okay, so yeah, we do reading conferences right now. We are just trying to build reading stamina, so I haven't even started reading conferences yet. We just hit 6 minutes. Woohoo! Super exciting. That's huge. So I was very excited about that. So now we start the year, they sit at their desk, they read the book, they read the whole time, this whole thing. When we hit 5 minutes, they get to pick a place around the classroom to read. So we hit the 5 minutes, so now we're around the classroom. So once we hit about 10 to 12, I'll start those reading conferences, and I'll hit anywhere from 3 to 4 kids during that time. Okay. You want to mention that you're a Mr. 1 for this course?
I can kind of jump off of you,
Yeah,
Nicolette.
go ahead. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up.
I'm in the same county as Nicolette, so we do the same iReady testing beginning, middle, and end of the year. And iReady is just the computer-based program that the county gives us, like the county purchases for us to use. And it tests their reading abilities for their phonics, vocabulary, reading comprehension, their ability to read literature as well as nonfiction text. So it kind of gives us a little bit of a picture and then of what their abilities are at the beginning, middle, and end. I have very similar assessments in my classroom compared to Nicolette, and even from the whole first grade to second grade, they're kind of the same. So the sight words, those high frequency words, we test those. The phonics skills, our grade isn't testing them this year, but we are still reviewing them and kind of doing a checklist of if they've mastered the skills or not. And then the reading assessments we're doing similar to Nicolette as far as testing the standard, coming up with a basic assessment for the reading standard and testing it that way.
Okay, question 2 kind of feeds off from that, which is what other types of assessment do you use when instructing the reading with your students?
Okay. So I think all of those that I already mentioned, and then sometimes every now and then I'll do, like Nicolette said, as far as reading conferences, you know, just a checklist. Are they grasping the concepts that we're working on in the classroom? So not necessarily a grade, but definitely a check-in with the students.
Yeah, I use the informal, like the reading conferences with them. I actually made my own, like where I ask like the question about the standard, and then there's a spot where I can jot down which phonics maybe they miss, like they miss that that E at the end is going to make the vowel say its name. So I can jot little notes there. High frequency words that maybe I notice, oh, hey, they keep missing the word down or something like that. Just so I can have that to bring them back. The iReady does group them nicely based on what skill level they are, but then I can really fine tune it and get a like group back in small group with me. As far as other informal like assessments, I do like the reading inventory at the beginning of the year. We're just finding what books they like. I used to use the one that's, I can't even remember, Marnie, is she in here? I cannot remember the name of that book right now. But there's one with like little frogs on it. And I actually kind of modified it a little bit where we have like smiley faces and it has pictures. So like, do I like books about snakes? And then there's a little picture of a snake, and, you know, they circle the smiley or sad, or, you know, just different stuff, kind of finding what they like. And I think that's pretty much like the informal kind of assessments with reading.
Okay, so how much time would you say is spent daily on reading instruction, and how does that time break down in your classroom?
So we spend at least 90 minutes a day on reading, and our ELA block at least. We have like in place in our schedule like 2 hours, and that kind of looks a lot like a whole group reading lesson. And then we might break into practicing that. So maybe IDR time where their individual daily reading, we would break into that where they would read, and that would be the time where I would do our reading conferences and just kind of check in with the kids on how they're doing on the standard. We would have our writing time in there as well, built into our reading usually. And then we could go into, depending on the day and time, reading stations or centers so that they have time to practice skills. So their phonics skill or their vocabulary skills. That's how my day kind of flows on a good day.
So I actually have 2 reading blocks. I teach in person in the morning, and then I switch classes, and then I come virtual for the afternoon, but they look very similar. We start with the morning meeting. I do a very quick 5-minute read aloud, which is typically just either a book that I've heard them talk about a lot, or maybe something we haven't touched yet. Like if we haven't read any like graphic novels or anything, like I just grab kind of something to open their eyes to the world of reading. Today we read The Koala Who Could, or I think that's it. Sorry, I'm in this one, and like it just, the very first page really works into like visualizing. So normally I don't teach a skill with it, but this one, it just kind of lent itself. So normally it's just for enjoyment. We read The Wonky Donkey yesterday. Like it's just to get them excited to listen to the story. So it starts with a read aloud. Then we quickly go into about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on whether it's Monday or like Thursday. The beginning of the week, it's a bigger block. As it goes through, it gets smaller. But we touch on grammar for about 15 minutes. We really look at, you know, the skills and what happens if you change the first sound or the last sound, and then what happens. From there, we take a, you gotta take a break because they're first graders and they're antsy as all get out. And then I'll read another book, and that's my book for the week. So I pair books. This week it was The Bad Seed, and then it's paired with a nonfiction sunflower book. And we pull out, this week we were talking about the character and how the character kind of changes throughout the story and what lesson you can take away from it. So I introduced the book. We read it every day for about 10 minutes, and then I'll do some sort of mini lesson that goes with it. We talked about character this week. We talked about setting this week, problems and solutions, the overall lesson that you get from the story. And that's kind of consistent throughout the week. Like we build a little bit, like the first day was talking about the character, the second day was talking about the setting of the story, and then we talked about the lesson, and then today it goes into the nonfiction, and it's a similar, talk about the nonfiction text features, how the illustrations are, what the words are about basically. And then we break up and we do the daily 5 at Treadway. So in the daily 5, there's read to self, listen to reading, read with a partner, work on writing, and word work. So they're responsible for kind of picking what they want. During this time, it's my time to work with the students. So that's when I would do their reading conferences. That's when I'm going to pull small group. That's when I can test one-on-one or retest with a kid. Basically during that 30 to 40 minute block of the daily 5 is my small group time.
Okay, so that would kind of be the reading program that is used in your school, because that's question 4, that what reading program or materials do you use with your students, including ELLs?
Okay, so that's the reading structure is the daily 5. It's not like a curriculum or anything. The program, we use Wonders as a school, or as a grade, I guess. Our whole school doesn't use it, but we use Wonders, and then I also use Rooted in Reading with mine. And that's pretty much it, but I follow the daily 5 structure.
Our school, our grade uses the Center for the Collaborative Classroom as their reading instruction, and then we don't necessarily call it daily 5, but I think each teacher does their own variation of the daily 5. So for ELLs, though, I know we haven't really touched on that. Nicolette mentioned a lot of good things that she does. And we all mostly do, but
yeah, it's pretty common.
Try to do. Teaching for ELLs is definitely just the, using best practices for sure. So a lot of the vocabulary that are in the stories that we use, some of them are tricky for our ELL students. I know one book that I was reading this week, it mentioned that the moon was smiling down on them or something like that. And it's like, you have to really break it down, especially not only for second graders, but those ELL students in our room. I don't have any this year, but if I did, it would definitely be a stopping point to focus on, if that was my focus, for the book. I think this book we were just reading for enjoyment, but a lot of pictures and explaining, breaking down the vocabulary.
Yes. And I wanted to touch back on, I totally skipped over the ELLs. I'm glad you brought it up. Like assessments, like chunking it out. I had an ELL, it's been 2 years ago now, where he only got 2 answer choices as opposed to the 4 that everybody else got, because it was such a struggle for him. And some of them, just the way they were worded, it did not make it fair for him. They were almost worded to make it a little tricky to see their reading, but for him it didn't level the playing field, I guess. So kind of chunking it out, really that one-on-one time with him too, like sitting down, talking to him, showing him, because like it's stuff as simple as finding number 2 that they freeze, like what? So just having that time to really just get with them in a small group has been like the biggest thing with my ELLs.
Okay. What other print or digital reading materials do the students have access to for additional practice?
Nicolette, with your since you're virtual this year, are there any digital resources you
Yes.
use?
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said, because I'm like, what is this question asking? Okay. Yeah, I use Epic Books, getepic.com, where they have tons and tons and tons of books. We also, for the digitals, we connect to Storyline Online, where there's just books, tons and tons of books read by celebrities, and they love it because they use fun voices and it's very engaging. And we also use Teach Your Monster to Read. They love it. They get to build their own monster. They're teaching this monster how to read, and they love it. I get all the time, is it time for Teach Your Monster? I'm like, no, we're not. We're still doing our spelling words, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I use Epic Books as well, and the students love it. It's their kind of time to explore different genres and different interests to them. You find out really quickly by using that, at least I did, that what their interests are. A lot
because it tracks their books. Like you can see what they've read.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a school-wide resource room or collection with leveled texts? If so, how do teachers use this collection? If not, where do you get your leveled materials from?
So our building has a resource room, but I don't want to say that I don't use it, but I don't feel like I've taken advantage of it like I should. We also have like games and stuff in there for different literacy centers. But if I wanted to find a leveled text for them, I would probably look and see what, well, I know that I've used like the Ramped Up Read Aloud, and I've found a lot of different books in here, and honestly, I search for them on my campus to find them. I ask different teachers.
Yes. Find your teacher besties for sure.
Usually they have almost every book that's listed in the Ramped Up Read Aloud.
That they do. Or if they don't, the other one does. We have leveled readers in our classroom. We were left them, like it came with the program, and each year like it just gets passed out, like it's supposed to stay in the room. So we got leveled readers with the reading curriculum, and we got level readers with the science program. So they can be a little bit dry, some of them. So I use them intermittently, I guess, unless they really need them. And also we get with the Wonders, sorry, I'm getting out of my desk. With the Wonders curriculum, they get their own like student books, and they build kind of nicely. So depending on like, I guess what they need is more so. Like some of them can independently read it, so they'll read it and do an activity. But those that can't, those are the ones that I have in small group, and we're working through the text together. So I guess it's more modified on their need as opposed to the actual text at this age anyways. It's probably a little different in the upper grades, but most of mine, I think all of my students came in this year at level K. So we got some growing to do.
How do you differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all students?
I look at the data that comes from iReady, and then I pair the two together as far as their data and how I know the student. And fortunately for me, I moved from first grade to second grade with majority of my class this year. if I was starting, a regular school year without that, it would take a lot of getting to know my class in order to pair the two with data and the child, the student, and seeing where they truly are, where I feel like their needs are, and then I would kind of group them based on their needs. I think that was the question. Sorry.
Yeah. Similar to her, like starting off the year, iReady's the biggest go-to until you really get to learn the kids. So I initially will group off of the iReady scores, kind of what iReady told me that they need the most of, and areas where they're maybe striving and stuff like that. And then after that, you get to know the student. So based on their test scores, based on their reading conferences, and the groups aren't always the same. So it might be a group that I'm going to pull for phonics, but that group is going to look a lot different than the ones that need to get pulled for maybe a comprehension component. So small group, and then like with the daily 5, their word work looks different. I have some still that we don't know letter sounds this year, so we're working on that in one group. And then I have some kids that she almost read Assailant off the board the other day, and I was like,
oh my.
I know.
That's awesome.
So it just depends on what they need. Like, and it's a lot about getting to know your kids, getting to know what their needs are, spending that time talking to just them, listening to them read, and taking note of what they're reading about and the pieces of it that they're missing.
Would you say that's different with ELLs?
I'm sorry, you said, is it different with ELLs? It cut out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
would you say that it's like a little bit more intense with ELLs, that you're scaffolding or monitoring more intensely with them?
Yeah.
Sure.
It takes time. Yeah, that's a big.
Yeah. I mean, there might be ELLs that they understand. The best example I have is I had a student who she knew what the vocabulary sentences were. Sorry, I keep pointing over here because it's like where my stuff is. She knew what the vocabulary meant, but she couldn't put it into a sentence that made sense. So that was one of our skills. But for her in order to scaffold her, like I asked her to just make a picture of this to represent the word, and she could do that, and then we would have that conversation, well, what's happening in your picture, and I might write it down for her and then have her go back and either trace over it or rewrite it on a different paper.
I second.
Okay, so those would be some of the accommodations you make for them?
Definitely.
Letting them respond orally too, like you were saying, like she just couldn't put it in a sentence. Not that she couldn't do the skill, just the actual pen to paper kind of thing. So allowing them that opportunity to tell you their thinking or to draw out their thinking, you can get a lot out of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much time does it take to assess and plan for all the different reading needs in your classroom? How much time do you spend on average planning like a week of instruction?
This year already, I feel like I've spent like 26 hours every day doing it. Like, just because I'm moving grades, but I don't know. Sometimes I try to keep it very, I don't want to say basic, but I want it to be in a routine. So I'll have them do the same activities, but with different words. So the same thing for the vocabulary words. They're doing the same kind of skill, putting them into a sentence, finding the matching vocab word, playing memory or something. But the words change weekly. So same thing with their phonics skill, so that they understand what they're doing. All I'm really doing is changing the skill that we're working on that week. I would say to prepare it, I don't even know. It's a lot, sometimes it's a lot of like front loading that, and if you change grades, like it gets easier with each time you're in that grade. Like first grade, I felt like I had it like this, and then I moved, and it's like so. It just depends on how you manage your own time, and I don't know. If I had to guess, I'd probably say at least an extra like 30 minutes. a day. I don't know. I don't know what to
You
say.
lie, liar.
That's a lot.
Well, it's the beginning of the year too. In the beginning of the year, you're always here late. Because it does take a lot right in the beginning, getting through all that initial paperwork and the initial planning and going, oh gosh, this is not going to work with this group. I got to change it. So you're right. Once you get into the year, once you get that routine built, it gets faster. You know what's going to go where. You just have to change what it actually looks like the content of it, but the idea behind it's the same. So once you hit that routine, it does get much faster. Currently I am planning how to teach virtually, which is crazy. Packing their bag. That's why I was like, I literally ran back here from the front of the school. We were have parents come and pick up their like bags of papers, and like they had pirate hats in there for next week and applesauce for the following week. So like trying to plan all that right now, it's been at least probably 2 to 3 hours extra a day for me at this point. But that includes I've had to build a Google Classroom, and I have to update the Google Classroom every day and put tests on the Google Classroom, which is not something that you normally have to do. Normally you have your paper tests that get printed and then they're there. Whereas these, I'm literally taking paper tests that we would do in the class and making a digital version of it on Google Forms and the Google Docs and different stuff like that. So right now I feel like I live here. But that is not normal. But I would say on a normal, okay, we'll go to the second 9 weeks. Second 9 weeks, it's probably an extra 30 minutes after school that I'm here. I typically am walking out at about 4 o'clock. As long as they haven't taken too many of like your Wednesday planning or your after school or your specials time. As long as you get most of that, you can stay focused.
What type of home reading or family involvement program is used in your classroom or school?
Our district does the Superintendent's Reading Award, which is like they have to fill out like a reading log, and it's so many books equals the Reading Challenge Award for each. It's different for every grade. But for me, it's just getting the kids to really understand that they don't just have to read here at school, that they can read at home too, and reading with their parents. But we do our own classroom reading log, and I just have different incentives for if they've reached so many books, I'll let them go to treasure box or something. But our school doesn't really have a set reading challenge or reading reward for anything.
I'm trying to answer stuff in the text box too. It's the same thing. We have the superintendent's reading thing. I send home monthly book logs. They do the superintendent's thing, but I have monthly ones. So first, second, and third place will get like a little treasure box. Like, okay, you read 25 books this month, you get this prize. So to the top 3 readers, sometimes it's just a Skittle if I don't have anything, and they're over the moon for a Skittle. So I do that. What else is there? What was the family? What was that part of the question? I'm sorry.
It's okay. What type of home reading or family involvement program?
Okay, so that's with the book logs. Last year, I haven't had a chance to do it this year. I'm hoping to do it pretty soon. I would like to be able to have volunteers though, so I don't know if I'm going to put it off, but I don't want to put it off too far, so maybe I'll just figure it out. I did adoption buddies. So we got little stuffed dogs, and it was basically like a morning of like, what is that? Build-A-Bear, that's it. Build-A-Bear, where they picked out their pet, they picked out a name tag, they named their pet, they brushed it, they blow dried it. And in order to get to take this pet home, they had to come up and sign a certificate with the dog's name on it. And it was basically stating that they were going to care for this dog, and how you care for this dog is you have to read to it every night. That's how you care for this dog. And one of our standards is living versus non-living. So it fed into that. And then also another one of our standards is kindness to animals. So it fed into that. So then after that, we had the group paws come in, and they sat down and they brought their dogs in and they talked about how to care for your dogs and all this stuff. So it ended up being like a full circle thing. But then once they took it home, if I noticed that their reading logs weren't getting filled out, I kept a note of whose dog was what. I'm like, hey, I noticed your reading log. How's Fluffy doing? And they're like, and then sure enough, they'd come in, look, I fed Fluffy. So that was I really loved it last year. So I am hoping.
Really cute idea. I like that.
They loved it.
Okay, so we're closing up. So if anyone has other questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I saw someone asked, I think this is more geared towards Nicolette since she's virtual as well. So do you prefer paper tests or Google Classroom tests?
So that's a good question. A little bit of both. Paper tests because it's what I know. There's nothing new to it. But now that they're going on they're finally figuring out how to leave the Google Meets and go to another screen. We're on week 3? Yeah, we're week 3, so we're almost there. If we can get that component figured out, I like going through the Google Classroom. It's all in one place. Most of them, like the way you set it, they'll grade it for you. So I still go through and look, because right now, like we did a spelling test today, and I have kids that for D we're clicking P because they look very similar, and L's and I's. So I just kind of go through and I give them grace on some of those because they're still learning. They're learning keyboards and all that stuff. But I have really liked the digital platform. We started doing the iReady testing this week as opposed to a Google Classroom. Instead of the paper one, I'm doing the iReady test, and I love it. They're so much more engaged than me standing up there, because right now I read to them. I'm like, okay, guys, this is Sam. Sam has a bag. Sam is at school. Whereas those iReady stories are actually kind of interesting. Like, this girl's playing soccer, and she had to go in because her friend got hurt, and they're like, oh, this is cool. So I've really been kind of liking the digital. I actually am going to pilot it for our grade with my in-person class starting tomorrow. So I'm hoping it goes really good. I'm kind of excited.
Would you like to share, Kristen, even though I know that you're not?
Well, I'm trying to, okay, so digital versus paper. I have done a couple of exit tickets digitally, and that was really nice for me because I could, sorry, I just saw Stephanie on here. She's my intern. She just popped up. I'm able to get their responses very quickly, and I don't have to worry about collecting papers and checking every single one. I can see quickly who answered what question in just a matter of seconds. But there are certain things that I would definitely prefer the paper pencil for. In second grade, I want them to be able to write a complete sentence when they answer their comprehension questions. And so that's really difficult for them to do on the keyboard. Like, they can't, they're 8 years old. I can't expect them to be able to type a whole sentence in a matter of seconds when I know that they could write it much faster.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So Bella actually wrote a question, which is our next question, which is, what does MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, or RTI, look like in your school or district?
Okay, so for us, we're a Title I school, so we actually have MTSS specialists for reading. So your whole class is in MTSS Tier 1. So that's the interventions in your classroom. So once they go to that next tier, once they're in Tier 2 or Tier 3, they actually go with a specialist for 30 minutes a day. And I've heard they changed it this year, but it used to be the SIPS program that they would do during their MTSS time. And then of course, you build in extra supports in the classroom across the board, no matter what the student is, no matter whether they have the MTSS label or not. But that's what it looks like.
Tier 2 and Tier 3 are just a lot of, it's practically almost everything you're doing already in the classroom, but it's data, it's tracking it for each student. So for her school, it's great because she has someone that can do that, hopefully.
Not bragging or
we just got that position at our school. So we're still waiting to see the benefits of that. But it's just a lot of tracking, and it's usually they're doing sometimes a lot of the same tasks that the rest of the students are doing also, but it's just really seeing, are they making any progress or not? And then tier 3 would be that one-to-one or true, like the smallest group you could possibly make with a lot of additional data tracking.
Okay. So who are the staff members available to assist teachers and students in the area of reading, and what are their positions and roles? I know Nicolette touched a little bit on that just now.
So we actually have 2 this year. They got relabeled. They used to be the MTSS specialists. Now they're ELLs. I don't know. I can't remember the new name for them. But we also have a literacy coach. That's my go-to. She's the one that I've been going to for help with the new, because I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with assessments for my virtual kids? Like, it's going to be impossible for them to navigate this reading test online. There's so many pages. They're flipping back and forth. So we actually kind of together, we're like, hey, let's do this iReady. So that's who I go to for everything. Staff members, teachers, and students in areas of reading. And that's pretty much it. Sorry.
I was responding to Isabella. She asked, what kind of people can help us, or well, she didn't ask that, but what kind of people can help us for reading? It would definitely be our literacy coaches. Yes. But they're also going to help you find those professional developments. We get a lot of emails. This professional development's available now, this training, if you need to brush up on this, on SIPs, or, she's going to be the one that sends us those emails. And if I was interested in one, you could definitely search on, usually your county has some sort of catalog of what trainings are available. But that'd be who you went to if you were looking for a specific training that your county offered.
You kind of answered my last question. Then we'll go to the chat box, which is what kind of reading professional development is available for teachers in your school or district? And you find about these opportunities. You mentioned that the district sends you a couple of those.
Yeah, we're kind of fed those by our literacy coaches, usually if they're reading or writing related. So
they crank them out. Like, if you want this training, I've had a couple that all of a sudden I get a notification that I have a sub, and I'm like, what? And I've been signed up for a training, and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. So there's a ton there. And if there's any that I want to attend, I just put it out there. I'm like, hey, I want to go to, what was the last one? A Kagan training. I want to go to a Kagan training. And they're like, okay, let's see what we can find. So there's a ton. You just have to ask.
Definitely.
Okay. Katie Moncrief in the chat box asked, what was the number one you struggled with during your first years? Maybe something you never thought you'd struggle with?
Yeah, I tried to answer her. I put spending so much time after school. My first year, I'd probably say that I was here until at least 5 o'clock every day. But I was trying to make sure I was really prepared. Not that I don't want to be unprepared now, but it's once like I said, you get into the groove of things and you start to really own your craft, and what you're stepping into the next day.
So it's very similar to that. I actually have 2. So kind of juggling it all. Like, you really are juggling a lot of stuff that, to be honest, school does a great job, but there's stuff that you don't learn until you're on the job. Right now I mentor a first-year teacher this year. And she's like, oh my gosh, you just can't learn this stuff. I'm like, it's okay. That's why we're here. Like, find a teacher at your school that you can go to, that you can talk to, that is your safe place, who's going to do whatever they can to help you. Because there's just a lot that, how do I clock in? Like, stuff like that, you don't know who to ask when it's your first year, and don't be scared to ask. Everybody has been a first year teacher at some point. So just
they might not act like it, but they have.
I know. Then you found the wrong person if they don't act like it, because I still feel like a new one this year. But so just kind of juggling it all. Like, you get probably about 80 emails a day and trying to go, is this important? Do I have to do this right now? Is not finding that person that you can go to. And then the second thing is that I struggled with was being confident in my education as an educator. I came in my first year, and I'm on year 3 and I'm just now getting it fixed. But I came in and I said, these assessments do not match my standards. They're not lined up right. I feel like I'm doing an injustice to these kids trying to test them on a standard I didn't teach. So I've been at it for about 2 years now, and finally this year we're making some changes with the assessments. But I feel like had I been more confident in myself as an educator and the education I was provided at UCF, like, yeah, I do know my stuff. I know what I'm talking about. Be confident in it. You have a voice, and don't be scared to step out of the box. Like, it's okay. Your classroom does not have to look like that veteran teacher that's been in there for 30 something years. You can do it different.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with Nicolette.
Thank you. That's great advice. Paul said, you mentioned that there's no set school reward for reading and reading logs, but does the school/school district set homeworks or at-home reading requirements? Does the teacher do it, or is it just non-existent?
For my classroom, I have an expectation that they read 20 minutes every night. And it's actually, I've kind of changed things up from first grade. I had Nicolette's daughter in my first grade class, and like now they're responsible for writing their own agenda this year. And so they, I hope, are taking ownership of that. And I encourage them to do 20 minutes of daily reading homework wise, but grade level, that's not necessarily the expectation. I think we just almost assume they're reading, but there's no way for us to hold them accountable if they don't do it.
Right. That was a loaded question. So the reading, they get like awards and a certificate or a medal depending on how many books that they read through the county. As far as the school, there's nothing really additional for it. The past 2 years we've done like a reading count, so a monthly reading count, and whatever teacher's class had the highest reading count in first grade, kindergarten, second, all the way up. I think they got a popsicle party monthly. And then as far as homework goes, we don't require homework. We can send home extra practice, but we don't require homework other than reading for 20 minutes. We do recommend that they practice their spelling words and their sight words at home. And I also send home stuff like, hey, this is what we're doing in class. This is if you want to practice, just so the parents, the ones that want to really be involved, know, okay, this is what my student's doing. Oh, hey, I noticed they're struggling in this area. What else can I do to support them at home? But outside of that, we don't require any, well, unless if they don't finish it in the classroom, they do have to do it at home. I'm just saying. They have to sign it and send it back in.
Sade asks, who are the staff members available to assist? Oh, we already answered that. Let's see. Cynthia asked the same. Okay, Angelica asks, what type of home reading or family? We already asked these. Oh, Isabella, could you reiterate the grades that you teach, your years of experience, and what schools you worked at?
Yeah, I teach first grade. This is my 3rd year. I work at Treadway Elementary School in Leesburg. I think that was all of them.
And I currently teach 2nd grade at Astatula Elementary in Astatula, Florida. And this is my 5th year. I'll stick with it. I get so confused on that question.
Every time you get asked that question.
I know. I graduated in December, so I'm going into my 6th year.
There you go. That's what you say. I'm going in. I like that. I think you figured it out. Only took you 6 years. So.
Right? I don't know. They laughed at me.
Jessica asked, do you use a DRA or QRA with your students?
So we don't use like the QRI that like you guys have used in the textbook, but we use different variations of it. So just based on our curriculum. So my curriculum with the collaborative classroom has its own reading assessment that we give the students, and it will categorize the group the students based on how they score.
Yeah. Mine, my group last year didn't get there. My group the year before, we did a little bit, I think it was out of the QRI book. Just, it was only until the 4th 9 weeks. For them, you know, especially this year, they're coming in learning letter sounds still. So they're pretty much all on the same level. So until I really need to hone in on a specific skill, I'll probably hold out on using that.
What advice do you have for first-year teachers going into teaching during this COVID-19 era?
Take one day at a time.
Flexible.
I had to tell my class today because they can see the frustration on my face too. You know, things are changing daily, and I know you guys see that in just the world around us. So in the classroom and in a school, things are changing by the drop of a hat. I mean, in the evening, we're told one thing, and then by 8 o'clock Monday, the next morning, it's something completely different. So I tell the students, like, we have to be flexible, and I can get very frustrated about things because I'm like, I need to know. But I'm like, our theme this year is go with the flow. So I make them do like little wave motions. I'm like, here we go. Don't ask questions. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yes, just flexible. Like, I remember trying to start back at school this summer. Like, I'm like, oh, my anxiety is so bad. What's going on? But it was just that constant, like, I don't know. Are we going back? Are we not going back? What's it going to look like? Are they going to, I have a tiny little portable. I'm like, how am I going to get 20 kids 6 feet apart? Logistically, that's not possible. We got to take out a wall or something because that's not going to work. So I remember feeling super anxious. And then once it finally started, I went, you know what? We just have to deal with the hand that we're dealt, and we're going to make it through. We're going to take it one step at a time, one moment at a time sometimes, but it's going to be okay. Like, we went from the beginning of the year where they could come in and they could take off their masks if they were behind. We had these plastic partitions. As long as they were behind their partitions, we were okay. Well, then we had our first active case of COVID. So then now they have to wear their masks every day, all day, which is, I struggle with. So kind of just adjusting to that, like, okay, guys, now we have to do this, but it's going to be okay. And you're doing it with a smile on. And so it's just be flexible. You guys are already doing it. You're going to school. Like, you had to adjust how you did it. So think about how you feel as a student. They're the same. They're the same. Just patience, lots of patience, and be flexible.
Paul says, I would imagine that having younger students in the classroom with masks, social distancing, etc., what is the biggest challenge you're having with that?
They eat their masks. That's one. They're really good. Kids are really resilient. They don't get enough credit. They complain less than adults. I think they complain less than me about it, to be honest. They don't like to social distance. They are cuddly little beings that just, you know, they miss their friends. So getting them to be distant, like, has been really, really a struggle. So we do the hand sanitizer, we wash our hands. We're learning, we used to do like it's a Kagan strategy where, you know, hand up, stand up, pair up. Now it's elbows. Like, we do elbows, we do sticky elbows. So they're still getting the connection with other people, but I've been kind of surprised at how well they've done this year. Biggest challenge. Oh, and they lick the partitions. or they go like this, and then they draw on them. I'm like, guys, that's defeating what we're trying to do here. But that's my experience. What about you, Kristen?
No, they're very resilient, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
They just, once they know my classes right now is separated, and if they're at their desks, they can take off their masks if they're 6 feet apart. But as soon as we go to partner read or whatever, they already know, and they get on to me. They're like, Miss Lamoreaux, your mask. And I'm like, oh, sorry. But it's, me to project my voice, I have to shake off my mask and then I'll forget and I'm coming back over. So luckily someone got me a cute little lanyard thing to hold it up.
I need one of those.
They really do a good job. They do better than adults for sure.
I agree.
So we have 3 more questions. The first one we already addressed. I'm just going to go over the last 2 for time's sake. So the first one is from Hannah, and she asks, are you teaching in video format, or how are you keeping your students involved? I'm assuming if she's referring to, is it synchronous or asynchronous class?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
It's okay. She asked that, are you teaching in a video format, and how are you keeping your students involved?
I teach on Google Meets. So it's face-to-face the whole time, pretty much the whole time. We do some breaks and stuff. So face-to-face, like breaks you do in the class, because I'm doing virtual setting, the students get tired. Yes, you can tell if they are getting tired. They are antsy, they are up. So we do brain breaks. I'll play like a Jack Hartman video or a stretching video or something that gets them up moving. Today I played some guy playing like an air guitar and they were breaking it down. So it's the same as in the classroom, like giving them that time at home to take a break, because that's a long time to sit in front of the computer. And actually my virtual ones get more breaks than my in-person ones. We only do about 10 to 15 minutes before we take a break, and they can stand up, take their headphones off because their ears start to hurt, take your headphones off, go get a sip of water, shake it out. And I recorded a little girl today, she jamming on the air guitar. It was the cutest thing ever. But I'm working on, I guess Google's Meets is trying to come out with breakout rooms. Like Zoom has breakout rooms. Google Meet doesn't have that just yet. But we have to use the Google Meets because it goes with our Guardian program, which lets me see their screen. So that's why we use Google Meets. Otherwise I would use Zoom. Google Meets freezes and you can't mute everybody. So you've got the kid that's muting and unmuting going, and I just kick them out. Oh. Yes, I just say, you gotta go. And they come back and I'm like, get your mom, go get her. But
in the classroom though, it's kind of the same. I mean, it's not the same thing at all for sure. Like what Nicolette is doing is like a whole different thing. But in the classroom, I mean, you can tell when they're starting to get antsy or whatever, and we'll literally, everyone stand up, kind of stretch your hands, let's wiggle. And I'm very strategic on trying to do like a whole group read aloud or reading lesson. It can't go past like 15, 20 minutes because they're sitting there too long. So they have to get up, go to their desk, get something. Like I try to plan my lessons very strategically so they are not sitting in one spot for more than 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. They just don't have that time span, and they don't have the stamina to do it, especially right now after being home for 5 months.
Yeah, like it's 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to sit at the rug, and then we're going to go back to our desks, and we're going to do something. Then we're going to come back to the rug, and we're going to so transition, working on those transitions, those first couple weeks of school. If they're not getting it right, they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again until you're getting those transitions in less than 10 seconds. And I'll even count down. I'm like 10, 9, let's go. So we count it down, getting to move quick so you're not wasting, because it sounds like initially when I thought, oh, gosh, you transition that much, I felt like it was going to take up a huge amount of my time, but it's a matter of seconds, and they do it quickly, and it gets them up and it gets them moving. I guess that's the difference. You can't really do those transitions virtually, so maybe that's why I have more breaks. I never really made that connection until just now. So yeah. Okay,
our last question comes from Sharday Page. She asks, how is classroom management working digitally?
It's not bad actually. I use cue cards. I got these, so most of the time I just have to go like this, and then they all mute. Right now Google Meets is freezing a lot, so we've had to readjust and be flexible. So now they know they can unmute if they like, because before they would raise their hand. Like I had a whole little thing, like we would post what I expected them to do. You got to be on time, act like you're at school. Like, I have kids that show up in their uniform, like they are ready to learn. You sit in one spot. You're not up running around with that computer. And this is all covered like really hard the first week of school. And every once in a while I'm just like, hey, I just saw you jumping on your bed with your computer. Where are you supposed to be? Turning on their video. I actually don't require them to turn on their video. Sometimes I'm not a big fan of what I see. So if they're more comfortable and they're still responding, I don't make them turn on their video. I've already seen stuff that it's just not fun. I don't want to see it. It was raise your hand to talk, but now they know they have to unmute and say, Miss Hunter, it's Nicolette. And I know, okay, all right, so-and-so, you'll go next. So just being flexible with working around it. But other than that, I feel like a classroom management pro online because I can mute them all. So that's a huge bonus to it.
Let's see, we have a question for one more.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
What are you using to safe distance in groups? What does it look like? From Jennifer.
I'll let you go, Kristen. I'm going to respond.
So in class, at least at our school and on our grade level, we feel that we haven't been told otherwise. So we have our students working in a small group. And by small group, I mean, yeah, they can physically touch one another and they can play with the same manipulatives, or they can be within 6 feet. They do have to wear their masks, and they're not supposed to share supplies. So I have a lot of individual supplies that before it was just like group supplies. So it was everyone, there was a bin of markers and everyone got to use these markers, or there was a like black expo markers. There was a bin for the dull pencils and the sharp pencils, and you just took whatever you needed. And now it's like, I don't want anyone using the dull pencils again. Like, not that they would, but I would resharpen them at the end of the afternoon. And now I don't, like, I quarantine them and I quarantine my books. And so a lot of the supplies are not shared, but they are allowed to be close to one another with their masks on. But it's a lot of hand washing and sanitize, we're not right on top of people, but we're close enough to be able to hear them with the mask on.
Mm-hmm. So it's a similar thing. We have to wear the mask all day, every day, except at lunch. They even have to at recess, which if they play a part, I let them pull it down because they're going to sweat to death out there. But in the classroom, they each have a bin. They have a math bin and a reading bin. The math bin then has a pencil box that has smaller manipulatives in there. The bin has larger manipulatives. It has a whiteboard, a marker. A lot of this stuff would have been communal before, but now it's just theirs. Their reading bin has their books that they picked out for the week. They each get their own, like, which finger to read with, a little strip, a lot of stuff that they would have been able to pick through before. Whisper phones are all already in their bin, and it's theirs, only theirs. And then their supplies, I wrapped, like, everybody came in and they picked out washi tape on the first day. So all of their pens and their pencils that they currently have, I didn't do the whole supplies that they brought in. As I get them out, I'll do them. But I washi taped them so I know whose is whose. They're responsible for sharpening a minimum of 3 pencils every morning. And it has to be their pencils, but we don't share supplies. We sanitize our hands as soon as we walk through the door. I go through about midday and I sanitize. Before lunch, we wash our hands. When they come back from lunch, they wash their hands, and then we sanitize before we're heading back out. It's constant. There's sanitizer all over my room. But as far as like everything, as long as they have the mask on, they're still close to their friends. They're still able to get those connections and bond. So that's pretty much the safety stuff that's in place.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kristen and Nicolette, for joining us today. I'm sure we all wrote down some great tips and tricks for when we get into the classroom. I did send out 2 important links in the chat box towards the end of the session, one being the link for the form of certificate of attendance proof that you were here today. I was brought to the attention that we are having some issues with the title of those certificates, so we'll be working on resolving those issues shortly, but still fill them out because they're still valid as they are. And the other link is the calendar for our future KnightED talks, so you make sure that you tune in for the rest of the sessions that we have planned for the year because they're going to be great. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.